Legislation for the Advancement of Colored People held a conference here in Nashville, and of course you were there. And one of the things that they talked about had to do with the metro school system. And I know that you've been very interested in education, and especially the metro school system, and that quite recently the council passed a $110 million piece of legislation leading toward the schools. Let's talk about the metro schools and some of the things that you see.
Yeah, what you're referring to is we've just been talking about the arena, which has gotten most of the publicity. I do want people to know that an even larger amount of money than the arena went into renovation of the schools. I had, since I've been mayor, visited a number of schools. We have some ones that are in very fine shape. We also have some that are in terrible physical shape. And that seemed to me to be a good place to begin putting our investments. So I put into the budget, and the council subsequently passed and approved a bond issue of I think about $115 million to renovate the schools, and that process is underway.
Very good. Now, and of course, it's almost impossible to move anywhere without talking about the major issues of crime and violence. And it's sad that, indeed, we do have to talk about that. But let's look at what Nashville is doing in order to try to decrease the teenage violence that we find on many of our streets and some of the other problems associated with crime and violence.
Well, there's lots of things, of course, that people are trying to do. They range from, I guess, the softest and the most long range to very short term. I've been working hard these past couple of months with Dr. Benjamin, who runs our school system, and Judge Shukoff, who's the juvenile court judge in town, to try and work some ways in which we put some strong deterrents, particularly against weapons in schools. I mean, ultimately, having schools a place where kids are safe, where they're free to learn without fear from, threat from weapons is a fundamentally important kind of thing to do. So that part is underway. We also are trying to do some things which lead children hopefully down a different path and then shows them up in the juvenile justice system later. I'm a strong believer, for example, in these preschool programs, whether it be Head Start, which is basically a federal program, or what Caldwell School here in Nashville does, is a way of giving children who maybe who don't have all the advantages that some of their classmates might have had in their early years, giving them a head start, giving them a chance to kind of catch up and hopefully a better shot at doing well in school and not getting off into a life of crime. So all of these are pieces of the puzzle and things that we're working on.
Very good. And of course, Mayor, soon will become more involved in the gubernatorial campaign. And I would imagine that many of our viewers are familiar with some of your activities in that direction. And they'd like to hear some of the things that you have to say in reference to the state of Tennessee. We know that you came in as a political novice and you surprised everybody after you became mayor, and some of the very, very progressive things that you've done since you've become mayor. And some of the things, so why don't take this time to talk about the gubernatorial campaign and some of the things that you see on the horizon for you.
Sure. It's something which I really had not thought seriously about until really this last fall. And I think when I got into the mayor's office, what I found was that a lot of the issues which I cared most deeply about and were the reasons why I got involved in politics in the first place were probably more fundamentally state issues than they were local issues, that the laws that really affected them were made at the state level. I'm a strong believer in jobs. I think that having a good job and having the availability of jobs and steady jobs is one of the foundations of any community, and one of the ways in which families build their version of the American dream. Is what lets you plan for the future and raise your family and go out and take part in the life of the community. I think that creating jobs and attracting jobs is something I have a knack for. And it's something I would like to be able to work on behalf of the entire state rather than just Davidson County. I believe I can do a good job. Crime, we touched on it in juvenile crime, but has become an enormous issue. And I'm a firm believer in truth in sentencing. The situation we have now where someone who commits a violent crime can serve just a tiny fraction of their sentence before they're back out on the street again it's gotten out of hand.
Explain that, Mayor. perhaps many of our viewers don't understand exactly what is meant by truth in sentencing.
Well, give you an example. If a person were convicted today of aggravated assault, fairly serious crime, they would, and they were found guilty of that, they might be sentenced to 10 years. That would be a typical sentence for that. If they had not committed too many other crimes, they'd be what you call a range 1 offender. So that 10 years is automatically reduced to 30% of that number, or 3 years. We have a safety valve in place because we don't have enough beds, cells for everyone, which reduces it by another 40%. That makes it 1.8 years. You then get out, you get 16 days of time for good behavior every month, and that reduces it down slightly over a year. So what that means is that the person who was sentenced to 10 years, the public was told they were sentenced to 10 years, the jury thinks they were sentenced to 10 years, actually is eligible for parole shortly after 1 year, and about 30% of people get parole on their very first try out there. Now, if a person is sentenced to 10 years for something and serves 8 for good behavior, I don't have any problem with that, and I don't think anybody has any problem with that. But 10 years, meaning really 1 and change, is it's not a deterrent anymore. It's clearly a ridiculous situation and one that needs to be changed.
And of course, by moving people through the system, and evidently that's what we're doing in terms of allowing them to move out early. It means that if we keep them in longer, it will also mean that we'll have a greater financial commitment, does it not?
There's no question that in order to do what I'm talking about, it's going to require some financial commitment to have additional cells. It's perhaps not as much as you might immediately think, because, of course, you do have criminals who are just on a revolving door. They're in, they're out, they're back in again, and I think it's clearly in the public's interest to just keep them in a little more. But there's no question that it would require that. It costs, in a modern, well-designed prison, it costs about $39 a day to keep someone there. But when you have violent criminals, I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's something you have to pay, and I think, frankly, the public is very willing to pay that to keep, especially violent criminals, off of the street and out of the schools.
You know, we've often connected crime with the drug problem, and indeed there is a real connection. And we're talking in terms of the statewide efforts. Now, how do you see the drug problem from a state perspective, and what could we possibly do in terms of trying to turn it around?
I think that the drug problem, you are exactly right, appears to be at the heart of a lot of these crimes that are committed. Part of it is enforcement, trying to keep drugs out of the state. That is ultimately, you have to do it, but it's not the world's most effective way to fight the problem. I personally believe that education of children as to the dangers of drugs and making them see that there are other paths and other possibilities in life, that they shouldn't get their head turned of making a little quick money in drugs or trying drugs, is something that the schools need to do, and that we can reasonably call on them to do, and ultimately will be a more effective and more humane way to deal with the problem.
And of course, you've always been concerned with the question of homelessness, and let's talk about that from a state perspective too, because I think that many of these issues, as you've indicated, cannot be solved on the local level. As a matter of fact, many of them probably require national attention more than anything.
Yeah, I would say probably in the case of homelessness that it is a national problem and a local problem. It's probably that single one is probably less of a state problem. Certainly here on the local level, you know, we've tried hard to make sure that people are at least fed and decently clothed and housed when the weather is cold anyway. And have tried hard to get some help into the hands of people who are homeless because they have substance abuse problems in particular. We have there's an organization which we have put some money into for the last couple of years called the Guest House, which is a place where police can bring people who are picked up who have, in particular, alcohol problems, and they can get some professional help rather than just being tossed in the drunk tank and then, you know, out again in a little while and homeless again.
You know, you've been throughout the state of Tennessee and doing your efforts, what have you found the majority of the attitudes to be about what's going on in the state of Tennessee? When you talk to people in East Tennessee, West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, I mean, what are some of the attitudes in reference to what the state ought to be doing?
It's interesting. This is a very big state. I'm discovering that. But, and there are obviously some regional differences and so on, but basically people have got a lot of the same concerns. Things I've talked about, people everywhere are concerned about jobs. I mean, there are very few people who feel so secure in their job that it's not something that's on their mind. Crime is a problem. It used to be a big city problem. It isn't anymore. It's small towns and rural areas are just as concerned as someone is in Nashville. TennCare, healthcare for poor people in particular, is on a lot of people's minds right now. There's a lot of controversy about it, and people want to talk about that. In public education, always. Particularly people with children, of course, in the system are very concerned about having a good public education system. That's been the window on opportunity for a lot of generations of Americans, and people want to keep it that way.
Well, what are they saying about the TennCare system? And again, why don't you...
I can't repeat that entirely.
Very good. But why don't you summarize for our viewers this morning some of your views in reference, we've got about 10 minutes, some of your views in reference to TennCare and the health area, because that is indeed one of the areas that you've got tremendous expertise. And let's talk about that for last.
Well, basically, the TennCare system, the idea of using managed care to provide care to persons who would otherwise be on Medicaid or who are indigent is basically a sound idea. It's been used in various ways in other parts of the country successfully. Arizona has a very successful program, for example. And so I guess I would start out by saying I commend the governor for picking this up. I think it's something he could have just punted on to the next administration, but he's grabbed something which is kind of a nettle and is trying to make it work. The program was implemented very quickly, and a lot of the problems it's having are really the problems associated with just trying to do everything very, very quickly. It also has probably has had less provider involvement, doctor and hospital involvement in the design of it than it should have had in retrospect. And getting that input, making sure that pharmacists and doctors and hospital administrators have their say, as well as lawyers and accountants, about what it looks like, is an important next step. If I'm successful in becoming elected governor, it's an area where I really think I can help, because, as you say, a lot of my background has been in this field over the years, and I don't want to be remembered solely as the governor who took a screwdriver to the TennCare system, but I think I can help and make sure that it turns into a program which can be a model for the rest of the country.
I think that would be one of the greatest